did the loan by June, going to construction right now. The first 3 blocks will be done before the mayor's first term. So what's significant about that is going from conception of a project to actually completing construction within the mayor's first term. A project that will forever change downtown Chicago. I showed you this picture earlier. When we build a transit station, and we own 56 of the transit stations, the Department of Transportation, we also own the Red Line, Blue Line, and Orange Line, we're making sure that we're building place into the neighborhood, that we're not just sticking something in there that doesn't fit. After we put this station in, Google leased 300,000 square feet, a block away from it. We're going to put a bike station at the base of it, I hope. And we're going to rebuild the Washington Wabash Station, which is a dead block in the downtown. This will reinvigorate this entire area. What is this a picture of? Don't know what that was. Anyway, there's also cheap stuff you can do. The Make Way for People program in Chicago, Janet Atarian worked very hard on this. And this is what we call a tactical urbanism project, where we literally have no budget. We work with the SSAs, we call them. That's like your bids. And we figure out how can we reallocate space that was for cars into something for people, something they could use. This is before we put in the furniture and all of that. And so we've done a number, we did 4 pilots the first year, we did 12. Now we have an RFP out in the street to partner with organizations to do 56 plazas around the city in the street. How much time do we have? What time is it?
You have a half an hour until we have to be in front of you.
Okay, so I'm going to try to go real quick so there's some time for Q&A. Who knows about the sharing economy? Most people. Okay, so we can go pretty quick. People are embracing the sharing economy, not just for the emotional reasons that they think it's a great thing. It saves them money. It allows them to live in the city. And so there are a lot of business models popping up, whether it's co-working spaces, Airbnb, where people are sharing the extra room in their house, people are sharing their tools, and transportation obviously makes a lot of sense. We're transforming from the me economy to the we economy. And this is where bike sharing comes in. Bike sharing is really changing the way we extend our transit systems, as Art was saying. It's changing the way people move between neighborhoods, and it's everywhere. It is everywhere, all over the world. Capital Bikeshare we launched in Washington in 2010. It was the first large-scale bike share system in the United States. We did it in 13 months. We partnered with Arlington County. I mean, that's from deciding we were going to do it to having on the street and having the mayor out there was 13 months. We used federal CMAQ money for 80%. So we got an entirely new transit system, and this is a transit system in Washington, D.C. for $1.2 million of local taxpayer money and about $5.4 million of federal CMAQ money. I'm going to skip through that. Bikeshare has sort of taken over DC streets. When we launched with 100 stations, we thought, okay, this is pretty cool. Chicago, when we launched with 300 stations in 90 days, we were like, this is pretty cool. Capital Bikeshare is up to 305 stations now, so it's tripled in size in just a little over 3 years. City Bike launched, and on busy, warm days is doing 80,000 rides a day. And that's, when you get to that scale, or maybe 10 or 20,000 rides in Chicago, then you're talking about actually reducing the strain on some of your transit lines. So you're talking about having a real impact. And you can see that this is even before they put Bikeshare in. New York City's seeing explosive growth in cycling. So with Divvy, we wanted to take it up a notch. Notice it doesn't even mention Bikeshare. At this point, we're like, okay, it's a few years later, people know what Bikeshare is. We partner with IDEO, who does a lot of product design work for Apple, and we had them work on the branding. I fought with them a lot, but they were right. And we worked with Firebelly Design to do the graphics. We picked a color that really resonated with Chicagoans, the Chicago flag color. And Chicago has adopted this as their own. In fact, the front page of the paper said, Chicago loves Divvy, which just melted my heart. It's very easy to use, point-to-point transportation. What other transit system can you deploy 300 nodes in 90 days and permanently impact the way people move in a city? There's nothing else like it. And by the way, Capital Bikeshare and Divvy both make money. And Capital Bikeshare doesn't even sell advertising or have a sponsor, and it makes money. And that's because it's run really, really well. You can get a daily pass, you can get a yearly pass. It's 20 cents a day if you have a yearly pass. And I would argue that it's cheaper than walking. Because if you walk, I mean, shoes have gotten expensive. You're going to burn out a lot of shoes. With Divvy, you will not burn out your shoes. We let the public help us pick where the stations went. We spent $22.5 million in the first 300 stations, 80% federal. We'll go to 475 stations. Next year, it'll be the largest system in the United States. And in this case, with Bikeshare, size does matter. It really does, because you need more nodes for it to be a more valuable transportation system. The benefits, obviously, are measurable throughout society. And there are even studies coming out, I saw one last week, showing the big impacts on street-level retail. Very, very important. I'm going to skip through this. I think people know about the cars. Here, we finally peaked on the car. There's not enough room to build more capacity, nor do we want to. Young people just don't care about the car. They just don't. And so vehicle miles traveled is finally starting to drop. And licensure is dropping. Licensure is down. It's either 23 or 28% over the last few years. And the same thing in every city across the country. Although I don't know about LA, but I'm going to assume. And people are realizing the true cost of car ownership. The cost not only personally to them, but to society if you want to have 2 or 3 cars. And it's more than people think. So, as we re-urbanize and life revolves more around the virtual world, right, instead of the physical world, we're going to continue to see this drop. And you're going to see people using car sharing more. Zipcar, Car2Go. There's our hitchhiker friend, right? Now he's actually got a service he can use. And there's quite a few different services out there, Lyft, Sidecar. And people are carpooling because nobody wants to ride with Hitler. Least of all me, by the way. And so as cities grow and the sharing economy grows with it, and electric vehicles finally come to the fore, and these nodal systems just continue to sprout up around the country, we're going to live in a very different environment. All right, let me just skip through this. I think what I'd like to do is get to, I'm going to skip bus rapid transit. You guys have the Orange Line, which is one of the best in the country. You don't need me to tell you about BRT. There's the downtown BRT, though, by the way, in Chicago that's going in. High-speed rail? Yes. Okay. So the future. Now, when these kids were thinking that this was the future, they may have been a little bit off. I mean, we wouldn't even have a garment industry in the U.S., so this obviously wasn't going to happen. But we are going to see, you know, a huge percentage of our population living in urban areas. And so what is the future of urban transportation? What are we going to see over the next decade? I think you're going to see a convergence of modes. The electric bike, the scooter, the bike, the small car. There will be a convergence there. When autonomous vehicles come out, we're not going to need huge cars. They probably aren't going to need bumpers. So that's going to change things. Point-to-point access is already very important, whether it's the Car2Go model or the bike sharing model. It's easier and better. See, it's not enough for these business models to be as good as owning a car. It has to be better and cheaper. Parking in cities will be primarily for shared use vehicles or for loading. When you do have autonomous vehicles and they're being utilized, it'll flip. So right now, cars sit 95% of the time. It's predicted when we have autonomous vehicles, they'll be active 95% of the time, picking people up and dropping people off. So you won't need parking so much, which means we could also widen our sidewalks. Walking and biking should be the mode of choice for trips less than 3 miles, for a multitude of reasons that we already covered. Cities will retrofit their streets around alternative transportation and healthy public spaces. Streetcars and rapid bus will make a big return to the fore, as well as light rail. Subway is very expensive, and a lot of cities don't have the money to do it, but cities that can't afford it will build onto their subway lines. Behavioral incentives will be important. So how do we want people to behave? And are there ways to incentivize people to ride their bike today or walk or take transit? We have TDM programs, but what's the next generation of TDM? And then finally, I think that public-private partnerships will continue to start to blur the line between government and private business, which I don't think is a bad thing. As long as we're working towards the greater good, there's no reason why somebody shouldn't make some money. And my argument is, if you try to make money like we're doing with Capital Bikeshare and Divvy, we're hyper-focused on making money. The service is a better quality service for the public. Now that doesn't mean that you don't put the service into disadvantaged neighborhoods or all those things, but it means you have to offset it with bigger stations in the tourist areas to pay for it. But at the end of the day, transit services need to be more profitable. So how do we get there? Repurposing space.